Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Manchester is Red podcast. I'm Tyrone Marshall in the host chair today, joined by our regular guest, Samuel Luckhurst. Samuel, how are you this lovely Friday morning? Another beautiful sunny spring day in Manchester. Not that we'd ever expect anything different, of course.
No, but at the risk of sounding like a prima donna, it's my show, isn't it? It should be my name that you're introducing at the start of the.
That's true. Yes. Sorry. Welcome to the Samuel Luckhurst show. It doesn't matter who I am.
I'll be like Megyn Kelly next, getting Botox and having all sorts of fillers put in to try and stay young or become young again.
Yes, absolutely. Stay young, Samuel. Stay young. I think you were right first time. Yeah, I don't do this very often, so yeah, you're right. I got the name of the show wrong. It is, of course, the Samuel Luckhurst show, and Samuel is the main event. So let's start firing some questions at him. It's been a busy week on the transfer front, or a reasonably busy week on the transfer front. It feels like those plans at United are starting to take shape, and so far so good. It looks like there's potential there for a positive summer. What you sort of made of what's happened this week and what we're starting to hear about those plans?
Yeah, I listened to the midweek debate, and it was good to hear that you did actually debate. The two of you didn't agree on what striker United should go for in the summer. I mean, when the Cunha story, it was Simon Jones who did it for the Mail on Monday, and he's clearly a journalist who's, if you've seen the stories, people have seen the stories that he's done in the past, who has very good agency contacts. And Cunha is absolutely a player that United should have been looking at anyway. It felt like it was inevitable that there'd be some interest there, but it has gained legs. It's gone from 0 to 60 very, very quickly this week, just from other colleagues doing stories, myself doing a couple of stories on it as well. And, the word that was given to me on Thursday was that his camp are optimistic about it happening, and I think it's in United's interest, obviously, to try and get as many players signed as early as possible in the summer. We all know that it doesn't necessarily always work out that way for a multitude of reasons. I mean, with the Ugarte deal last year, they had to wait for the McTominay deal to go through as well, and it was never a certainty that he was always going to end up at Napoli, where there was quite firm, more than firm. I mean, Fulham had offers rejected for him in the summer, and it was almost as if Napoli came in a little bit later on in the day. So that deal went through on deadline day, and of course the Ugarte deal went through on deadline day. But ideally, and it's not saying anything new here, I think every club would appreciate if they could do their business as early as possible, they would do. But with Cunha, where there's a release clause, there's no real hold up there. And United have also got form for paying in instalments. So Jim Ratcliffe, of course, very publicly bemoaned the money they still owed to clubs who, for players that they bought nearly 3 years ago, and players who United would ideally be getting rid of this summer as well. So that's I suppose that's the way around the whole 60, because it's £62.5 million release clause, and United were very conscious not to go above the 60 million mark for any of their signings last summer. I think Lenny Yoro was the most expensive, and that was including add-ons, and that got him to just over £58 million. It was a €70 million deal with Lille, but they need to be, it's you hit the nail on the head in the week, talking about how they got played by Atalanta for Højlund, and I think months after the event, there were people at United saying that Atalanta felt that they got a bad deal there. They were looking for 90 million from the outset, and I thought, really? Who the hell was valuing Rasmus Højlund at £90 million? It was jaw-dropping enough when United paid £64 million. And going back to the timeline of it, because I remember we're in San Diego at the Sea Harbour Hotel, very good recommendation by Simon Peach, when word came through that PSG had bid for Højlund. And I looked it up yesterday, and it was take it or leave it, £42 million. And then 2 days later, Manchester United signed him for £64 million. How does his value jump from 42 million to 64 million pounds, 72 million pounds, including the add-ons? Quite extraordinary, really. I suspect United won't get played like that or fleeced by clubs anymore, because it's happened too often. I mean, it happened too often before 2023, and it still happened with pretty much all three major deals that summer, really. The Mount one, Onana, was a very steep fee for a player who was available on a free the previous year. The Højlund one was the worst of the lot in terms of the cost and what they were getting for that money as well. But it does help that Cunha has a release clause. It's relatively steep, but I suppose if you look at him, how many goals he's got this season, 25, turns 26 next month. Brazil international, Premier League proven, playmaker, £62.5 million for a player who certainly was being linked with Arsenal in January is not too steep if United can indeed afford it. And the same with Liam Delap. I think there's a big attraction there because he has a release clause, which I still think is an element of cutting corners there. And I've got to just be consistent. I feel they need a proven goal scorer. I know they're rare, but I think that is that Delap would be far too. It's still a risk. There's still too much of a risk element there, where you're going from one player who's literally 4 years younger than Rasmus Højlund. Sorry, not 4 years, 4 days younger even. And his goal scoring record is better. Yes, would he be an upgrade on Højlund? Yes, but is he really going to develop into that long term goal scorer on a consistent basis for United? You can't be certain of that. There's a reason why a team that's about to be relegated and only got promoted last year signed him. He's clearly Premier League worthy, but United is such a huge step up, and the scrutiny that comes with it. I think what some people are maybe overlooking with Delap as well is that if he is having a bad time, I wouldn't be surprised if United fans were, chanting City reject. I mean, after Michael Owen scored his first goal for United, they chanted "You Scouse Bastard" at him because a lot of them just really didn't like him anyway. But there was a bit of gallows humour, a bit of sarcasm laced with that chant. And it'd be interesting to see how it would develop with Delap. But as far as Cunha is concerned, there are two players for that playmaker role that they should be looking at and have been looking at. One is Cunha, the other one is Eberici Eze. And if you offered me the choice between them, I'd probably go with Eze, even though his output has not been. I think it's only half, in terms of the goals this season. I think he's got half as many as Cunha. So you can fully understand why United are going for Cunha, and of course there's the Portuguese-speaking link as well with Amorim. He was the only player Amorim mentioned when he was asked about Wolves last week, and it was unprompted. And when he was pushed on Cunha, he became a little bit defensive. And here we are, barely a week later, and it's got to the point now already where it feels like it will be something of a surprise if Cunha's not playing for Manchester United next season. So that just shows you how quickly this story has developed over not even a week, really. It was probably Easter Monday that first story came out from Simon Jones in the Mail, and it's developed and developed and developed. And there's a line, I think, Ojogo or Globo, the Brazilian newspaper, have taken it forward a little bit more today. And again, Brazilian newspaper, it's bound to have good contacts with Cunha's camp. So he would be an exciting signing. I'd be excited to see him playing for United, as I would have been if Eze joined United. But as far as from what I was last told in terms of Eze, I don't think anything's anything's cooking at the moment, so to speak, in terms of a possible move for him in the summer. But you would feel that is a matter of time, given that he's only got 2 years left in his Palace contract. he's not always certain of getting into the England squad, even though I think he's, in terms of the ability of the wingers they have available, he's one of the 4 or 5 best, so he should always be getting in there. But the competition is intense. And Michael Elise left last year as you'd feel as though it's got to happen sooner or later that he does leave Palace. If not this summer, then it would have to be next summer, because I'd be amazed if he ended up committing to a new contract there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's touch on Cunha a bit more then, seeing it feels that's the most advanced. I mean, what do you make of it? People can listen to the midweek debate from my views, but essentially he's a match winner, but a bit of a maverick. He's a great fit in that he's playing the exact same double number 10 role that, Vitor Pereira plays the same system as Amorim, that 3-4-2-1 with 2 number 10s. Cunha is playing there, but he also gets so much freedom under Pereira that maybe he wouldn't get under Amorim. Like you, I mean, if it happens, I'd be excited to see it. Like I say, he's a match winner. He's the type of player you want to see at Manchester United. But he's going to be an interesting fit as well. And it's that challenge of, you mentioned it with Delap. It's maybe the same with Cunha, that he's stepping up to a big club. And I know he's been at Atletico Madrid and he's got the experience. But on the flip side, it didn't work out for him at Atletico Madrid and he didn't fit under Simeone. So it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. What's your views? Are you seeing purely positives with it?
There are pros and cons with pretty much any player that comes into a club. And that statistic that you said about Cunha walking and how often he walks during games, that's one, it's an amusing stat. 2, it's not a stretch to imagine as well, because he has got that body language. And I don't mean it's a negative body language, but he is a bit of a throwback. He's a playmaker. But then when I think of him playing against United at Molineux on Boxing Day, and he knew what he was up to that day, he would have known that there was a good chance that United would be in for him this year. And he was sensational. The quickness of his feet. He was getting kicked from United players, which is always a big compliment. The amount of players that have been signed by United in the past where they've actually played well against United, you can reel off. You can do a book on it. Really, there've been that many. And Cunha has got 2 man the match awards against United this season. I mean, last week's game, it's one of those games where you think it shouldn't even be a man of the match. It was that tepid a contest. But he was the match winner in that Boxing Day game. And the quality of his goals this season, he is someone that you want to go on YouTube and rewatch the goals they've scored. The 2 he scored at Fulham this season were just exquisite. I probably preferred the first to the second, and the second was this wonderful curling shot. But the first was that ball over the top. I can't remember who played it. And it's just the technique of his touch, the finish, all in one motion. And that's what you want from a playmaker. And there's such a huge onus on the playmaker in any team. And with United, it's obviously unique in the way they want to operate with 2 of them behind the striker. And they've only been, I mean, there's probably only been one who's really, over a good length of time, who's functioned well in that role this season. And it's not Bruno Fernandes, it's Ahmad. Because I think Fernandes' best form has come as a midfielder this season, even though he's had good games as a number 10. And you can always count on him wherever he would play. If you put Fernandes in goal, he would probably still be United's most creative player in a game. He has that much of an effect on the team. But they need an upgrade in that area, even though they've got a sure fit of number 10s as it is, because Mason Mount, I just think that's a mismatch. Mason Mount and United, he will get a 3rd season because he's unsellable, because Amorim loves him, literally. He's still not started a game, but I see his best work coming off the ball, which is a problem when you're a playmaker. Xerxes, they've got to be receptive to selling in the summer, because as well as he's done and as creditably as he's performed this calendar year, is he going to be part of a United team or squad that wants to get where it needs to get and wants to get? No, I don't see it. Mainu, it's still a bit of a grey area. Is he going to be a midfielder? Is he going to be a playmaker? Is he even going to be at United next season? You can apply that logic as well to Garnacho, who's made a good fist of it as one of the 2 number 10s. But there's still uncertainty as to whether he'll be at United next season. And when you just look, the most compelling case for signing a new number 10 is the goal difference column in the Premier League. United have got a -8 goal difference. It was remiss of them to have only made one attacking signing last summer, whilst they bought two centre-backs, a full-back, a defensive midfielder. I agree that they needed to reinforce all of those positions. I don't necessarily think they needed two centre-halves, but that's what they ended up with. But having ended last season on a -1 goal difference, it was remiss of them to only sign Joshua Zirkzee. And they bungled that because they thought they were getting a striker, and they didn't. They got someone who's a playmaker, someone who's a number 10. And as I said, Zirkzee has done. It's been a happy accident that Zirkzee's fallen into that United team under Amorim, and he did quite well as one of the two number 10s. But you look at where they are in the Premier League, and nobody has played well enough in the league for United this season. And I include Fernandes and Ahmad in that. A lot of these players, their form, their best moments, they have come in the Europa League. And that is still not good enough for Manchester United, because they're not going to be in the Europa League next season. If they're in the Champions League next season, that's a big step up. So you need better players. And they need far better players in the Premier League, because this weekend could ensure that they're going to finish in the bottom half of the table, which we know is going to happen. We've known it's going to happen for about 4 months, but you can't just say, "Oh, he did well for a few months this year before he popped his hamstring. Let's give him a chance." Zirkzee scored in 2 Premier League games this season. He got 7 goals overall. It's not his fault that United made a pig's ear of signing him, thinking he was a striker when he's not a striker. But I still think there would be a market for him, probably in Italy, because the pace is suited to him, and he's got decent clout there from what he did with Bologna. So you try and strike while the iron is, if not hot, but at least lukewarm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, let's presume for a minute it is Delap, and they signed Delap and Cunha for 92.5 million, and sell Rashford, Antony and Sancho for a similar sum. I mean, on paper, that looks like a very good start to the summer, doesn't it? And Rashford, Antony and Sancho, I guess, in a way, are going to be key to what United can do this summer in terms of what they can get for them. Antony and Rashford are doing their bit by playing well while out on loan. Sancho has maybe hit form, or at least found some numbers at the right time to make Chelsea think that's worth doing. If they can also almost offset a number 10 and a striker signing with those 3 sales, then it creates maybe more wriggle room than we might have expected in that summer budget.
I think Unai Emery's doing United a big favour with how he's managing Rashford, what he's saying about him, because I think Rashford's been fine at Villa at best. He's got 4 goals, 2 of them were penalties, 2 of those 4 goals were against a Championship team. The other night against Manchester City, that chance he got in the first 20 seconds, I think if you were to do a comparison of Rashford's first game at the Etihad 9 years ago, when he stood up Martin Demichelis, he was probably in the same area. And his movement the other night was comparable to 9 years ago when he was a teenager, and he skinned Demichelis and he scored in his Derby debut. And that's what he can do. We don't see it often enough, though. United certainly barely saw it in the final 18 months he was at the club before he joined Villa. But the other night, it's Rashford back in Manchester. He's leading the line. He's at City. The game's on TV. We've seen this happen before. You know, a player rises to the occasion when the cameras are fixed on them, and there's a big, not just nationwide audience, but worldwide audience. And United, people of United persuasion, I think, would have looked at that performance and thought, wouldn't have maybe necessarily known how to feel, in that they'd think, why can he do that for us this season? But also, at least he's doing that now because it's creating a market for him. There's been a lot of noise from some pundits, ex-players, talking about, I can see Rashford back at United. He wants to play for Man United again, which is just pure guesswork. As long as Ruben Amorim is there, he has not got a long-term future at United, and Ruben Amorim will be there at the start of next season, unless there's some act of God that that there's a sensational story that happens and for whatever reason, United need a new manager. But it's in everyone's interest that Rashford goes, because he clearly is happier away from United. He has regained some form. Thomas Tuchel has done United a favour as well, in that he included Rashford in the England squad when I thought that was possibly a bit premature. I think Tuchel spoke a lot, didn't he, about what Rashford did against Paris Saint-Germain, where you're kind of almost harping on about past glories, and those 2 goals against PSG were in 2019 and 2020, so it was quite a while ago. But Tuchel clearly is quite taken by Rashford and the way he's going at the moment. He's playing better now for Villa since the March internationals than he was before it. So I think it's safe to assume that he'll be in the England squad for their summer fixtures as well. So that is creating a market for him. And it's unusual what Unai Emery is doing, because you look at Ollie Watkins, who is a better striker, and his performance against Newcastle last week is probably one of the best I've seen from a striker in the Premier League this season. He got a goal. He hit the woodwork a couple of times. He looked fuming, as he said afterwards. He was fuming that he didn't start against PSG, and he set out with a point to prove. And then a few days later, he's back on the bench against Manchester City. Now, Emery can say, well, look how Rashford played. He scored a goal. He hit the post. Look, his performance as striker was absolutely what I wanted. But I thought we'd knocked this on the head, the whole notion of Rashford as a striker. I think Rashford had knocked it on the head as well. Yeah. He certainly bristled at the prospect of rotating with Rasmus Højlund up front at the start of last season. And he was not happy when he got back to pre-season. Antony Marshall has still got his feet up because he's still injured and still in the physio's room. They've still not signed a striker. And it's, well, we're going to have to probably use you as a striker when he's just had his career best season playing from the left wing, which is his best position. And if you've got Rashford and Watkins in your squad, logically you think, well, Watkins plays up front, Rashford plays on the left. Before Rashford joined Villa, if you asked anyone outside of Aston, who's Aston Villa's first choice left winger, they wouldn't have a clue. I certainly wouldn't have known. And I think you've seen that from the way Emery is. He's got a lot of options there, but he's using Morgan Rogers there. Sometimes he's using, is it Jacob Ramsey who's playing there sometimes as well?
McGinn played there.
John McGinn can play there. Exactly. And he's wanted to push Yuri Tielemans further forward, which I think has had a knock-on effect as to what he's doing with the front three. So it's a weird dynamic with Watkins, because Ollie Watkins possibly, selfishly, might have wished that this had happened 2 years ago, because a 27-year-old Ollie Watkins, there would have been a market for if he was being managed this way. And if from a United perspective, I would be tempted to see what his situation is going to be in the summer, because even though he is 29, Harry Kane was a similar age a couple of years ago, and he was the one Erik ten Hag wanted. And of course, Watkins he's not at the level that Harry Kane is, absolutely not. But he has got that Premier League pedigree. You look at his goal scoring record for Villa, it's pretty good. He was wanted by Arsenal in January as well. So it's, just looking at his goals record this season, he's got 17 goals, which is relatively respectable. I'm not too sure how often he's been starting and how many of those goals have come as a starter. But he's of course played a lot of football this season, so it's not too bad going, and that is clearly better than any striker that any of United strikers have managed this season. So Rashford playing as prominently as he has been for Aston Villa, it is interesting to see how that pans out. But as I wrote in the week, he wants to play in the Champions League next season, and Villa's result in midweek, it's not done them any favours in terms of Champions League qualification. It is very tight. A couple of big or biggish clubs are going to miss out on the top 5 places there. And at the moment, if there's one of those poxy supercomputers that Opta swear by, I suppose that they've got Villa finishing outside the top 5.
Yeah, like you say, very changeable. And that is the only real excitement left in the Premier League this season. And we've been discussing transfers. As tempting as it is to fast forward just to the summer, United do have some Premier League games left, unfortunately. One of which is Bournemouth this weekend. The 3 aways they have are all long trips, which is annoying when there's so little riding on them. Me and you will be up early on Sunday morning to head to the South Coast. I mean, let's put it frankly, from a United point of view, does anyone care on Sunday? I mean, it's all about Bilbao this week, isn't it, and next week?
No, but please tune into our coverage on Sunday, listeners. We need you. I suppose it is slightly more interesting in that the team he picks, I think, will signpost how he's going to set up against Athletic Bilbao on Thursday, in that certain players can't be undercooked for that game. So they're going to have to start, or at least come on for half an hour or the second half on Sunday. I've no doubt that they'll get to a point where he goes into the same, Amorim goes into the same mode that he did at St James's Park, where he starts changing players, and it's clear that those players are being rested, preserved for the game in 4 days' time, as was the case up at Newcastle when I think it was Mazraoui who came off and Bruno Fernandes came off. And when Bruno Fernandes comes off in a game, you are waving the white flag. United would have been probably 3-1 down at that point, or it was 3-1 or 4-1, and Fernandes never ever comes off. And it was pretty clear at that point that, and Amorim admitted afterwards, he was looking ahead to the Lyon game when Xerxes got injured, and all of a sudden it was right. Garnacho's got to come off because he's the only match fit forward we've got that's going to play with Fernandes, and Fernandes was the other forward who came off in that game. But with the Bournemouth match, where rather sensibly Casemiro and Maguire didn't play any part whatsoever in the defeat to Wolves, I would think that they will start, or if they don't start, they have to play at least half an hour because they need that match rhythm. That they are two players who you do not want to go 2 weeks without giving them any playing time. And it doesn't feel like it's quite the occasion where you can just start making loads of changes. As you said in the debate podcast in midweek, the Brentford game, which is sandwiched between the two Athletic Bilbao ties, that will be the one where United have to make those. We'll probably make. Well, I can see him making 10 or 11 changes for that one, where it may well be a case of Mason Mount and a bunch of kids, or Mason Mount, Victor Lindelof as the babysitters to a raft of academy players. I mean, I looked it up in the week. There've been 11 academy players who've made the bench this season and are yet to make their debut. Jack Fletcher's been an unused substitute 7 times, and that's the most of any of those players. A few of them have been goalkeepers, where Altay Bayindir and Tom Heaton were injured for the best part of 2 months. So that's why Eli Harrison and Dermot Mee, you've seen them not get a looking exactly, but they've been on the bench. I can't really see them getting any playing time, but certainly Jack Fletcher would be one that you'd think has got a reasonable opportunity of making a debut between now and the end of the season. Looking at the others, I mean, Habib Bourganet was a fixture on the bench towards the end of last season under Erik ten Hag. He's been on the bench once this season, and that was in Ten Hag's penultimate game in charge at Fenerbahce, and that was all the way back in October. He's just gone out. He's vanished from the picture altogether. Jayden Camerson, who's a right back, and Godwill Kukonki, who I suppose was somewhat unlucky in that he's been on the bench more often than Tyler Fredrickson this season, but he wasn't even on and was on the bench last week against Lyon. Then all of a sudden, he's not in the squad against Wolves, and Tyler Fredrickson is starting. So when push comes to shove with those calls, Amorim clearly favours seniority, and Fredrickson he's 20 already. He's not that young. He's had some really bad injuries and some rotten luck along the way. So a great credit to him that he was able to get his debut last week. But there are clearly quite a few players who are bidding for a debut, or I suppose in Chido Obi's case, a full debut. And you would think he will get that over the next 5 league games, because even Rasmus Højlund, and I know Amorim said last week, he doesn't want to take him out of the team. He needs a goal. You're not going to get a goal from him if you take him out of the team. But there will come a point, whether United get to the Europa League final or whether they don't, that one way of looking at it is, well, he's going to need a rest, so Chido Obi starts a game. The other way of looking at it is that we're replacing this guy in the summer. We might as well see what the teenager can do from the start, because he's only had a handful of substitute appearances so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke to someone from from Brentford's media team yesterday for a piece for their programme, and they asked me for kind of the player Brentford fans should watch, and I thought, well, you probably won't have heard of most of them, but the one I settled on for Brentford was Chido Obi, because that feels like the game he might start. But Højlund, let's talk about Højlund specifically ahead of this weekend. I mean, what do you do with him? I guess Amorim kind of signalled last weekend that, like you just said then, if he's not playing, he's not going to score a goal. But he feels like a player who needs a goal. And as free scoring as United have somehow managed to be in Europe, Bilbao is going to be their hardest test yet. And it still feels difficult to see them winning this trophy without a major contribution from their number 9. So do you play him at Bournemouth, maybe play him for the 90 minutes and hope that somehow he scores a goal and gets a bit of confidence heading into that semi-final tie?
I would imagine if it's going the way that it went against Wolves, then don't keep him on for the full game, because I think that could actually crush his confidence a bit more. Whereas if he comes off, although that's a signal that you've not been up to it today, at least in his mind, or in Amorim's mind, you could frame it as, right, you've done your bit for today. Look ahead to Thursday now, because you're starting for me. And that's the balancing act Amorim has got with managing players. But particularly in Højlund's case, he is judged and will always be judged on goals. And I remember saying to George just before, George Smith, of course, in one of the podcasts just before the season restarted at Forest, after Højlund had, of course, scored against Leicester, I said he cannot now go 5 or 6 or 7 games without a goal, never mind 21 games without a goal. And unfortunately for him, it's already been 6 games. They've played 6 games since the March internationals, and he's not got a goal. And the scrutiny is just intensifying, as it should do, with a Manchester United striker who's got 1 goal in 28 games. Last week, what I found that was telling was that as soon as the second half started, Chido Obi was told to warm up. And we've known for quite some time that Amorim doesn't have any faith in Højlund. He doesn't even hide it. That there were those 2 games against Bournemouth at home and Southampton at home, and it was identical, where the starting striker, in the case of the Bournemouth game, Xerxes, lost an aerial duel, and Amorim immediately turned to his assistant Carlos Fernandes and told him to go and get Rasmus Højlund. He was coming on. And in the Southampton game, Højlund's the starting striker. Second half, loses an aerial duel. Amorim turns to Carlos Fernandes and says, go and get Joshua Xerxes. He doesn't have any faith whatsoever in either of the 2. Well, it's one senior striker, effectively, because I don't think Amorim even considers Xerxes a striker, but he doesn't have any faith in them. And we knew that months ago, and we knew months ago that United would be going for a striker in the summer. But Højlund, if he wants to continue at Manchester United, he's got to do something in the running. He can't just feel sorry for himself. He doesn't lack in commitment. We've seen that pretty much from the moment he made his debut. And it was a good debut when he came on against Arsenal. He really unsettled Arsenal that day. And we've not seen that often enough from him in a United shirt. He had a pretty good Champions League group stage last season. His February purple patch was terrific, and you still wonder the damage that injury did. I mean, he's had 3 pretty significant injuries at United. The first one when he signed for the club, the second one, that one last February when United were on a winning run, and it effectively killed their top 4 chances. And also, I don't think you can quite underestimate the hamstring injury he got in pre-season, minutes after scoring against Arsenal in Los Angeles with the number 9 on the back of his shirt. He then didn't play until mid-September, and I think that's probably had a bearing in some way or form on his form this season. It doesn't excuse the current goal drought or the previous goal drought or the run of 1 goal in 28 games, but it is a bit of context, I think, that legislates for his lack of goal scoring. And also, we as we've said time and again, it was a mistake to sign him. It was a mistake to sign a 20-year-old with a pretty mediocre goal scoring record and tell them you're going to be Manchester United's number 9 after we've just finished 3rd and won a cup and we're shaping up to hopefully challenge for the title. It was just never going to happen. And he didn't really have the support network either, because Antony Marshall had his feet up for pretty much more than half of last season. So he was never going to be much support. Marcus Rashford's form went down the drain. So it's been an onerous task for Højlund. But this season, when you're into your second season, those slices of slack that were, pushed his way, you have to revoke them now, because he's been at Manchester United for nearly 2 years. So regarding this weekend, I absolutely would start him, because I don't think there's much of a choice. And I think also for his confidence, if you're going into a European semi-final and if a 17-year-old starts ahead of you for the game before that, when you're on a goal drought, I think that's probably more damaging for his confidence. So it's more a case of not managing the player's skill set, I think, for Amorim. I think he's actually having to just manage his confidence. What can he do to soften some of his decisions that he has to make? So absolutely start him. If it gets to the point where, if he's playing well, let him continue for the whole game if need be, because he should be robust enough to play 90 minutes on a Sunday and then another 90 minutes potentially on the Thursday. If it's going the way of the Wolves game, absolutely take him off around the hour mark, 70-minute mark, and make it abundantly clear to him that's you done for today. Rest up. You've got to get ready for Thursday, and just try and maintain that confidence. And I'd have faith in Amorim to do that, because his man management does seem, there is that warmth that he exudes, and he will need it in this run-in if United are to salvage their season.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll leave it there then for today. It doesn't feel like Bournemouth needs any more of a preview than that. Samuel, thank you for your time, and I'll see you again at Carrington in a couple of hours.
Yes, will do. Thank you again.
That's all for today. Please remember to leave us a like, subscribe to get the latest podcasts in your feed. The Samuel Luckhurst Show will be back on Monday to dissect everything that has happened at Bournemouth, and most importantly, to look ahead to the first leg of that Europa League semi-final. But for now, thank you for listening, and we'll speak to you all soon.